From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Happy Friday and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Houthis warn of military surprises in the Red Sea as the Iran-backed group escalates missile and drone strikes aimed at international shipping in the region. Iranians vote in elections for parliament and a key clerical body amid fears of a low turnout and with hardliners expected to tighten their grip on power. In an act of defiance, hundreds turn out for Putin critic Alexei Navalny's funeral in Moscow amid heavy police presence. Navalny died 2 weeks ago in an Arctic prison. At least 46 people killed and several injured in a massive fire at a restaurant in Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka. Authorities blame glaring safety lapses. And Facebook parent company Meta announces it will no longer pay Australian media companies for news, prompting a government warning that the firm was in dereliction of past promises. We begin in the Middle East with some very disturbing reports coming out of Gaza. Health authorities in Gaza say over 100 Palestinians were shot dead by Israeli forces as they waited for an aid delivery in Gaza City in the north. They say Israeli troops opened fire when desperate crowds gathered around aid trucks. Witnesses and survivors describe bullets hitting crowds around the trucks. There have been graphic videos coming from the site of the incident where Gazans can be seen carrying the injured and bodies of the dead on carts. Medical teams said they were unable to cope with the volume and severity of injuries. Dozens were taken to the Al-Shifa hospital, which is only partly operational after Israeli raids. Gaza health officials say that so far at least 112 have been killed and over 280 are injured. This has been the single largest loss of civilians in weeks in Gaza, where the death toll now stands above 30,000 after nearly 5 months of conflict.
We were surprised by Israeli tanks that came out and opened fire on people randomly and directly. Immediately afterward, all we found were martyrs, the injured and the wounded scattered on the ground in a chaotic and horrifying manner.
We went to get food and flour, and they started shooting at us. There are martyrs lying around, and no one is looking for them. Some need first aid, but there is none available.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has called it an ugly massacre. However, Israel's account of the incident is starkly different from that of Gazan authorities. Israel has denied shooting into the crowds. In fact, it says it had only fired warning shots attempting to ease a stampede-like situation which caused fewer than 10 casualties. Israel has also released drone footage of its troops attempting to disperse the swelling mob. It says more were killed in a crush of or run over by aid trucks trying to escape.
No IDF strike was conducted towards the aid convoy. I want to repeat that. No IDF strike was conducted towards the aid convoy. On the contrary, the IDF was there conducting a humanitarian operation to secure the humanitarian corridor and allow the aid convoy to reach its designated distribution point. This humanitarian aid came from Egypt, went through a security screening at the Kerem Shalom humanitarian crossing in Israel, and then entered Gaza for distribution by private contractors. As these vital humanitarian supplies were making their way towards Gazans in need, thousands of Gazans dispensed upon the trucks. Some began violently pushing and even trampling other Gazans to death, looting the humanitarian supplies. The unfortunate incident resulted in dozens of Gazans killed and injured.
Now, despite Israel's assertions, the violence has been condemned by Arab nations. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, and Jordan accused Israel of targeting civilians. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session where the Arab nations sought to support blame on Israel forces.
According to the information that we have, dozens of them have bullets in their heads. It's not like, firing in the sky to restrain people if there was confusions and chaos. It was intentionally targeting and killing. And the number that we have now is 112 have been killed, and the number is increasing, and 750 injured, and possibly the number would be increasing. This outrageous, massacre is a testimony to the fact that as long as the Security Council is paralyzed and vetoes casted, then it is costing the Palestinian people their lives. The Security Council should say enough is enough, and if they have a spine and determination to put an end to these massacres from happening all over again, what we need is a ceasefire.
Now, in typical fashion, the United States did block this UN Security Council statement for blaming Israel for the deadly incident. However, the White House has called for a thorough investigation into what happened.
Urgently seeking additional information on exactly what took place. We have been in touch with the Israeli government since early this morning and understand that an investigation is underway. We will be monitoring that investigation closely and pressing for answers. Our understanding is that there was a commercial convoy delivering humanitarian assistance, that there were no UN agencies involved. They were delivering assistance, and then beyond that, we have seen obviously conflicting reports.
Now, U.S. President Joe Biden has said that the bloodshed would complicate truce talks that were aimed at a ceasefire and release of hostages before Ramadan. President Biden also discussed this matter with leaders from Egypt and Qatar. But in a statement, Hamas said that the incident could jeopardize talks in Qatar, and it said it won't allow talks to be a cover for the enemy to continue its crimes. Moreover, Canada, France, Spain, and the European Union also condemned the violent incident.
I must say, I think this is a nightmare. I think the violence must stop. I think civilians can not be targeted. And at the end of the day, we need to make sure that international aid is sent into Gaza and that people are protected when they go and get that aid that they need to survive.
We are confronted now with an unprecedented disaster. It's not the first time, I recall it. The Security Council has to take all its responsibilities, and France will remain committed to work with all the Security Council's members to call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, as well as the release of all hostages. As President Macron stated it very strongly, a ceasefire agreement is urgently needed that guarantees the protections of all civilians and the massive entry of emergency assistance.
This latest incident comes amid mounting global concern over the humanitarian situation in Gaza. In fact, aid groups say providing humanitarian assistance for over 2 million Gazans caught up in the war has become increasingly difficult due to the ongoing hostilities and a complete breakdown of public order. In February, barely 100 trucks a day carrying aid reached Gaza. Before the war began, more than 500 trucks went into Gaza daily with food and medical aid. The United Nations says a quarter of Gaza's population is facing starvation. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned the West of a risk of nuclear war if Western countries escalate the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. In his annual address, Putin warned the West of tragic consequences if the West sends its military contingents to Ukraine. Now, doubling down on these comments, the Russian president said Moscow has weapons to strike targets in the West.
They're talking about the possibility of sending NATO military contingents to Ukraine. But we remember the fate of those who once sent their contingents to our country. But now the consequences for possible interventionists will be much more tragic. We also have weapons. They know about this. As I just said, we also have a weapon that can hit targets on their territory. And they should understand that what they are doing now, trying to scare the whole world, it does risk a conflict with nuclear weapons, which means the destruction of civilization. Don't they understand this or what?
Now, Putin has also announced that the deployment of advanced weapon systems, including hypersonic missiles, and that it holds military advantages in Ukraine.
The hypersonic complex Kinzhal is not only in service, but is also being used with high efficiency to hit especially important targets during a special military operation. The Zircon, sea-based hypersonic missiles, have also been used in battle. These missiles were not even mentioned in my 2018 address, but this system is already deployed. Avangard, intercontinental range hypersonic blocks, and Peresvet laser systems are on combat duty. The tests of cruise missiles of unlimited range, Burevestnik, and unmanned underwater vehicle Poseidon are also complete. These systems have confirmed their high, one can say without exaggeration, unique characteristics. The Sarmat ballistic missiles have been delivered to the troops. We will soon show them in the areas where they will be put on combat duty.
Now, in response, the United States has condemned Putin's remarks, calling them irresponsible rhetoric. Washington said it is no way for the leader of a nuclear-armed state to speak.
So it is not the first time we have seen irresponsible rhetoric from Vladimir Putin. It is no way for the leader of a nuclear-armed state to speak. We have communicated in the past privately and directly with Russia about the consequences of the use of a nuclear weapon. That said, we do not have any sign that Russia is preparing to use a nuclear weapon, and we will continue to monitor this carefully.
Putin's nuclear warning appeared to be a response to the French president. Earlier this week, Emmanuel Macron said he did not rule out sending troops to Ukraine. Now, that stance was quickly rejected by the United States, Britain, and other leaders of Europe. And after an uproar over his comments, French President Emmanuel Macron said all his comments on the Ukraine war were weighed, measured, and carefully thought out. He also added that everything that is necessary must be done to ensure Russia's defeat. And now, from one war to another, Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, looks like a war zone. The Caribbean nation saw a violent attack by local gangs on Thursday. Gang leader Jimmi Cherizier attempted to overthrow the government. The attack began the moment Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry arrived in Kenya on an official visit. What does Haiti's gang leader Cherizier, a former police officer, want? And how are Haitians coping with this latest attack? Our report has the details.
Residents in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, woke up to loud blasts and gunshots. A wave of panic swept through Haitians as they scrambled to save their lives. Violence broke out between armed gangs and security officials on the 29th of February. Haiti's international airport was shut down after it was attacked. Several police checkposts were run over and burnt down. Port-au-Prince's streets looked like a war zone, all because one gang leader was fed up with the Haiti government. Jimmi Cherizier, who's nicknamed Barbecue, was once a police officer who has now turned mafia member. He has taken it upon himself to teach the Haiti government a lesson. The gang leader's strategy was clear from the beginning. Start an armed rebellion the moment Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry arrives in Kenya for an official visit. The gang leader, who calls himself Barbecue, thought the absence of Henri was a power vacuum, and so he launched an all-out assault. Here's what Jimmi Cherizier, aka Barbecue, wanted to achieve: capture Haiti's police chief, kidnap ministers of the government, and overthrow Prime Minister Ariel Henry.
The country is in a situation it can no longer cope with. The country is not run. There is no leader. The population is in famine. People can't go out because of the insecurity. The population is tired. It can't take it anymore.
Cherizier says he doesn't think the Haiti government knows what it's doing, and he says that he's not alone. There's a group of gangs that want to remove the Prime Minister, and they've pledged to resort to all kinds of force to achieve their goals.
The first objective of our fight is to ensure that Ariel Henry's government does not remain in power by any means. All of us, the armed groups in the provincial towns and the armed groups in the capital, are united today.
As the fighting between gangs and security officials rattled the streets of Haiti, hundreds of civilians scampered for their lives. Some described what it was like to be caught in the crossfire.
There was heavy shooting. Everybody was lying down on the floor.
Haitians expressed anger over the lack of security and the growing instances of near-death experiences.
Situation that I saw down there is difficult. Everybody is gathering their belongings to leave the area.
Armed gangs fall onto us. We can't take it anymore. We have nowhere to go. We run with our belongings to put them away somewhere.
It's estimated that criminal gangs control up to 80% of Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince. They launch coordinated attacks against the government. This often impacts the day-to-day lives of ordinary civilians. As Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry begins his trip to Kenya, his country is gripped by violence. And the people of Haiti are fed up, because they don't support the gangs, nor do they trust the government. They've been left to fend for themselves.
Back in the United States, on the banks of the same Rio Grande River, standing nearly 500 kilometers apart, President Joe Biden and GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump took digs at one another over America's broken immigration system. Both the president and Donald Trump surveyed the U.S.-Mexico border as immigration and border security emerge as central issues in the 2024 presidential campaign. Both leaders arrived in Texas within a half hour of one another, and they were both briefed on operations and issues. They also walked along the Rio Grande and spoke to various people. President Joe Biden visited Bronzeville, which for 9 years was the busiest corridor for illegal crossings. President Biden also asked Donald Trump to stop playing politics and challenged him to back the bipartisan border security bill, which is actually languishing in Congress right now.
Here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Instead of playing politics with this issue, instead of telling members of Congress to block this legislation, join me, or I'll join you in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together. You know and I know it's the toughest, most efficient, most effective border security bill this country has ever seen. So instead of playing politics with the issue, why don't we just get together and get it done? Let's remember who the heck we work for. We work for the American people, not the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. We work for the American people.
Now, speaking at a press conference, President Biden said the Border Patrol agents are in desperate need of more resources.
It's real simple. It's time to act. It's long past time to act. I just received a briefing from the Border Patrol at the border, as well as immigration and enforcement, asylum officers, and they're all doing incredible work under really tough conditions. Really tough conditions. They told me what you already know and we already know. They desperately need more resources. Say it again, they desperately need more resources. They need more agents, more officers, more judges, more equipment in order to secure our border. Folks, it's time for us to move on this.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who visited Eagle Pass, which is currently seeing the largest number of migrant crosses, simply blamed Joe Biden. In fact, Trump went on the record a number of times calling the border crossings a Joe Biden invasion. He also painted a very dark picture of Americans kidnapped, raped, and savagely murdered by migrants.
This is a Joe Biden invasion. This is a Biden invasion over the past 3 years. I call him Crooked Joe because he's crooked. He's a terrible president, the worst president our country's ever had, probably the most incompetent president we've ever had. But it's allowing thousands and thousands of people to come in from China, Iran, Yemen, the Congo, Syria, and a lot of other nations. Many nations are not very friendly to us. He's transported the entire columns of fighting-aged men, and they're all at a certain age, and you look at them and say, they look like warriors to me. Something's going on that's bad. Crooked Joe is the blood of countless innocent victims. It's so many stories to tell, so many horrible stories.
While in Texas, Donald Trump met with Republican Governor Greg Abbott and Texas National Guard, who have commandeered a local park and put razor wire fencing at the river's edge to keep migrants from crossing. This in direct violation of an actual court order. In fact, the park has become a Republican symbol of defiance against the federal government.
The safest border in the history of our country, and now outside of this area where Texas has done an amazing job, and in a pretty short period of time, they're going to have it all covered. They have just been incredible. The operation that they showed me is nothing less than incredible. And I'll say this, it's a military operation. I mean, we have this is like a war.
Now, for years, anti-immigration has been central to Donald Trump's political identity. This time, however, he has pledged the biggest ever U.S. deportation program if, in fact, he returns to the White House. Stepping up his rhetoric, he even accused migrants of poisoning the blood of the United States. President Biden's campaign described Trump's comments as unhinged. But according to polls, immigration and border issues are, in fact, Joe Biden's weakest area for a second term. In fact, the latest poll by NBC shows Trump leading Joe Biden by as many as 30 points on the issue of immigration. More than 2.4 million migrants have crossed the U.S. southern border in 2023 alone. They were largely from Central America and Venezuela, fleeing poverty, violence, and climate change disasters. Our final story is about betrayal and espionage. Sounds like right out of a Hollywood movie. However, the United States has been hit by one of the biggest national security breaches in years. A seasoned American diplomat has admitted to spying for Cuba, a country that has had hostile relations with the United States for decades, going back even before the Cold War. Former U.S. Ambassador Manuel Roca's case has sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. It's been touted as one of the most brazen betrayals in the history of the U.S. Foreign Service. Our report reveals all the details.
The United States boasts of unrivaled and unparalleled intelligence and security agencies. They preempt threats and gather intel to safeguard national security. But a glaring lapse from decades ago has now surfaced, which is being touted as the biggest national security breaches in years in the United States. A seasoned American diplomat who was once deemed a loyalist has admitted to espionage. Manuel Rocha, a former diplomat, has admitted to spying for communist Cuba for years, a betrayal that has shaken the foundations of trust within U.S. diplomatic circles. Rocha's arrest in December 2023 sent shockwaves across the country. He was taken into custody from his house in Miami. The police alleged that he had engaged in clandestine activity.
After the FBI received information that Rocha was a covert agent of Cuba's intelligence service, an FBI undercover proceeded to engage with Rocha on several occasions. As detailed in the complaint, Rocha repeatedly referred to the United States as, quote, the enemy. During the undercover, he told the undercover that his efforts to infiltrate the United States government were, quote, meticulous and, quote, very disciplined. And he repeatedly bragged about the significance of his efforts, saying that, quote, what has been done has strengthened the revolution immensely.
According to officials, Rocha allegedly met with Cuban intelligence operatives in the 1970s, and he was recruited as a spy in Chile. The FBI is yet to reveal how exactly he had been helping Cuba, which has had hostile relations with the United States since the 1960s. The Caribbean country has also had remarkable success in infiltrating the U.S. national security establishment over decades. Manuel Rocha had a 2-decade-long flourishing career in the U.S. Foreign Department. He handled matters related to Latin America under former Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. He also worked as the ambassador to Bolivia from 2000 to 2002 and has been at top posts in Argentina and Mexico. Rocha also served as advisor to the U.S. military command. In counterintelligence cases like these, the defendant is usually charged with espionage, but he has been accused of lesser crimes of acting as a foreign agent, which might land him not more than 10 years in prison. With this, the US government will be able to assess the extent of damage that Rocha has caused, and the report, which might take years to finish, will not be complete without his cooperation. But the question is, how did the world's biggest superpower land in a mess like this? Many reports suggest that America missed quite a few red flags in its relationship with Rocha. In 2006, a CIA operation received a tip that Rocha could be working as a double agent, but the lead wasn't pursued. The CIA also received information in 1987 that former Cuban President Fidel Castro had a supermole. Many suspected that it was Rocha. Once again, the lead was not pursued. The 73-year-old is scheduled to formally plead guilty in a Miami court and be sentenced on April 12th. Now the American justice system grapples with the delicate balance of accountability and cooperation. Because despite the gravity of his actions, Rocha's potential for a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation raises several questions. He has admitted to have conducted the highest-reaching and longest-lasting infiltrations of the US government by a foreign agent. But despite this, he will see the light of day again.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for being with us. We hope to see you right back here next week. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol